chat from driver to passenger, the parent's role in transition to adulthood. And this evening, it is a collaboration with our close sister Parent Training Information Center in Southern California, TASK. So I would like to introduce my esteemed colleague, Luisa Maria Castillo, and she'll tell you a little bit what she does at TASK, and then she'll kick us off. Luisa?
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm Luisa Maria Castillo, and I am so happy to be back. I had the pleasure of being with Alyssa for a while, and now I'm an area manager for TASK, which is also a PTI parent center, but for Southern California, counties of San Diego, Imperial, LA, Orange County, San Bernardino, Riverside. So I'm just happy to be here with you, Alyssa, co-presenting. And we are going to go ahead and start off going over our agenda. What are we going to be reviewing tonight? So we're going to be going over what the current role of parents are. That is the driver in their young adult's life. How important is planning for the transition to adulthood, whether you have a young adult or have someone over the age of 18? We're also going to be learning how to slowly let go of our role as a driver, and we will see some tips from parents who are learning to do it depending on the age of their children. We're also going to be reviewing 9 steps that can help you prepare your child to live as independent as possible in life and assume their new role. And finally, how can you assume your new role from driver to passenger? So that's in for our agenda. And let's start with the parents' role. Why do we say that parents are forever? Well, because no matter what direction our children take, whether they're our children, they're young people, they're adults, we're always going to be there to provide them with the support that they need. Why? Because we have the history to carry out our child into adulthood. You have been a parent, you have been their doctor, their guide, their psychologist. You have advocated for them as active members of the IEP team since the beginning. For that reason, you know what has worked for them and also what hasn't worked for them as well. So you know about their entire life, not only pieces of it. And you also maintain high expectations that are based on your young adults' strengths and their interests, their needs, and you also guide them to make informed decisions. So while it is true that your participation in the IEP team is formally going to end when right transfer to the student at age 18, parents often become a transition expert or a case manager once they graduate or they go into a transition program, they go into trade school or an inclusive college environment. So your children will begin to take on more responsibilities, and you as parents are also going to find new ways to provide support. So it's important to remember that although our role as parents do change, when our young person begins to become more independent and reach adulthood, these roles don't end. They never end. And you've realized the topic of our seminar, right? From driver to passenger. There have been many drivers here in our audience, I'm sure, for many years, or perhaps you're still the driver. But just because your child reaches adulthood, it doesn't mean that they're going to be completely out of that vehicle, of that car. Rather, they're going to take on you're going to take on the passenger role to continue guiding them, to continue guiding your children. So you want to think of it as maybe a manager to a consultant. Now, this is why we talk about transition planning. You may think that it's not time yet, since your child maybe is very young, or maybe they are in the appropriate age, but you don't know where to start. But remember that it's never too early or too late to start planning for the transition to adulthood. Why is planning important? Well, a transition plan provides the basic structure to prepare a person to live, to work, and to integrate into the community as fully and independently as possible. And as in all aspects of life, the more transition planning that takes place while the youth is in school, the more prepared you as parents and families are going to be when you have to make decisions and actions need to be made. In fact, once your child is in school, this is mandated by IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Law. IDEA, as what it's known for, mandates an ITP, which is an individualized transition plan that must be part of the IEP once the student turns 16 years old, which means that transition planning and the written ITP should begin sometime during the student's 15th year. And the best practice is to start earlier, like when the student is maybe 12, 13 in middle school. That's what would be mostly appropriate. But in fact, maybe you've heard of this new California legislation that just passed. Now it's not going to be before the 16th birthday, but to ninth grade. So starting in July of 2025, it should start in the ninth grade, which may mean that they're going to be about 14 years old. However, remember that if you could start earlier, if you could start in the middle school years and start prepping the IEP team to start creating this plan, the better. So if your child is still in school, it's not too late to begin building that robust ITP, that individual transition plan. Even if your child is already 16, and you feel that you need to be more involved and contribute more to that plan, you still have that time to do it. Remember that a well-crafted and detailed ITP can be the roadmap to the student's independence. This can drive the IEP. And in order for you to be more involved, there's actually a webinar that both Alyssa and I co-presented on about 2 weeks ago that you can find in PHP's e-learning library, and it's called Contribute Effectively to Your Youth's ITP. So navigate it. It's already recorded there, so you can go there for reference, and it'll give you good tips into how to create that robust ITP and add value to it. Now, starting transition planning early. Having an ITP and the IEP sooner than later is crucial. And this is going to result in better outcomes for your youth. So no matter how old your child is now, planning is needed to help your child be an independent adult. Now, for many, thinking about letting their child make their own decisions can cause, a whirlwind of emotions. It can cause us fear, distress, many emotions, and for different reasons, because we all have different circumstances. Maybe you think, my child will never be capable. Maybe we need to take care of them more than others. Maybe they have a more of a severe disability. It can be many reasons. But remember that this is going to be all tailored according to your child's abilities. So you determine how much you let go. But the important piece of this is that you start doing it. But let's talk more about it on the next slide. Releasing slowly. So when we hear letting go, when I hear the word letting go, it's kind of like you either do one thing or the other, or we can compare it to like swimming or sinking. It doesn't mean that. Okay? It's not that you're gonna abandon your child to figure out so that they can figure it out on their own. It's about supporting them as they grow into their independence. But you also stay beside them and you learn them, you allow them to learn how to navigate the world. And we want to think about it as a gradual process, not as a sudden event. We do understand how challenging it can be, and it's natural to have all of these mixed feelings. But to make this process easier, it helps to start planning now and take small and manageable steps. Many parents in our parent centers are going through the same transition, whether they're children that are still in school or already taking their first steps into adulthood. They're going through it. And one of these people is our dear friend and colleague Alyssa. She's going through the process herself, and she will be sharing some valuable advice on how she's been able to slowly let go while still being there for her young adult. So let's allow her to share those tips.
Thanks, Luisa. Oh, did I freeze? No, I'm good. So yes, so it's essential as our children grow into young adults, grow into adults, that we let them make their own decisions, take their own risks, and make mistakes. and learn from those mistakes and develop relationships with others, whether they be peers or mentors, and little by little separate from us. It makes sense that their lives are governed by their own preferences, and we need to let their wings spread, which is something that Louisa says, which I really like, and I have now adopted myself. So as parents, we need to stop doing things for our teens. We need to stop packing their lunch and scheduling their activities, or putting their laundry in the washing machine and then taking it out of the dryer and folding it and putting it away. I distinctly remember a friend of mine years ago. I have a son who's soon to be 30, and my daughter who's 26. uh, she told me she had kids a little older than mine, and she had her 12-year-old doing his own laundry. And I thought, well, that's a really good idea. So I taught my son when he was 12 to do his own laundry, and my daughter to do her own laundry. So the neurotypical and the non-neurotypical both were doing their laundry when they were 12. And that's great, because I didn't have to do the laundry anymore. I only had to do it for two people, not four. So they would also have other household chores, like taking the garbage out, and taking the recycling out, clearing the table after dinner, feeding the dogs. Contributing to household responsibilities increases the self-esteem and the confidence. And you want to teach them ways to be more organized. I mean, we have so much available to us at our fingertips with technology these days. So using reminders, using the timer on the phone, or using the reminders and the calendar on their phone. Now, of course, if they happen to misplace their phones, I mean, we all kind of live in that kind of fear. What happens if I lose my phone? But there are ways around that with backups and knowing all the cloud stuff, which I'm not going to get into. But also, as simple a thing as letting them have a place. My mother used to say, a place for everything and everything in its place. So their keys, their house keys, just, it always goes on a hook somewhere. Is it by the door? Is it by a desk? Is it in their room? It just always goes in the same place, so that when they go to look for it, it's always there. This helps to make them responsible adults. And we want to give them decisions to make about budgeting and household expenses. I mean, for years now, my daughter, who's 26, she has an emotional support dog, and she has been paying for that dog's food. So she has to figure that into her budget out of her own money, or else that dog is not going to eat. And Cookie would not have that. So Cookie needs to eat. So Grace, my daughter, needs to make sure that she manages her money to make sure that Cookie gets her 2 to 3 meals a day. And while she's doing this, Grace, not the dog, Grace is feeling more independent, and her self-esteem is increasing. So I wanted to tell you a few stories about our experience. And who doesn't love a good story, right? But just to let you know that Grace, who is 26 years old, has Prader-Willi syndrome, which is a developmental disability, and I have her permission to share any and all of these stories. So just that, so you know. So I'd say it was maybe about 4 years ago or so, maybe a little bit less. Grace went to her first doctor's appointment without me. She was with she's in the self-determination program through the regional center, and she went with one of her staff. And we just thought it was a good time for her to try this on her own. And she actually did research on who the doctor was. It was a doctor none of us knew. She needed to go to a podiatrist for an ingrown toenail, I think it was. So it wasn't like it was, there weren't any complicated questions. There wasn't any need for scaffolding. It wasn't a really high risk kind of appointment. But she was able to go, give her insurance information, say what her medications were. When asked, you always ask, no matter what's in the system, they always ask you, what are your medications? What are your doses? So she was able to do that. There was no follow-up needed. So it was a completely successful experience from filling out forms, like I said, the insurance, the medications. She was able to tell what her pain level was. And she even took notes about aftercare. So it was an ideal situation for everybody. But then the big question is, would she go solo to other doctor's appointments in the future? And the answer to that is yes, she has, and she will continue to do so. I will still make time to go, and certainly for some appointments, I quite haven't let go of those yet, and I'll still keep going to those. And actually last spring, I think it was, I did a presentation on pediatric to adult medical care from a parent's perspective at the Family Voices Conference. And I will be doing that again through Connections California spring semester in February, where we're actually going to have a series on parents' perspectives. And I'm going to do the one about medical transition, because that's one that's near and dear to my heart. So let's talk about social media, which is something that is not near and dear to my heart. Louisa knows very well. I know very little about how to work around in the social media world. And maybe this is why I was dragging my feet when we needed to find some staff for self-determination program. And I think it was probably in the winter, maybe about December of 2022. And Grace wanted to put an ad on Nextdoor. And people out there, you probably know what Nextdoor is. It's that app, a community app for people in the community. And I was saying, oh, let's wait until January. Let's not do it before the holidays. Let's just wait. And so the day before, I think it was Christmas Eve, Grace actually wrote an ad, put the ad on Nextdoor without telling me. She told me after the fact. And she advertised that she wanted a woman and somebody who was 20 to 30 years old. So I don't think you're allowed to do that in an employment ad. That opened up responses from other folks in the Nextdoor community, and a 50-year-old man answered. And Grace wrote back to him quite bluntly, for the whole online community world to see, you're too old. So you can only imagine this opened up a torrent of comments about ageism. I was able to find just one of them because in the interim of those, 3 days that I didn't know what was happening, Grace finally told me what was happening. I was able to go back and find some comments, but the moderator had shut it down because I think it got probably a little contentious. After much digging, I saw one post from Grace that said, mind your own business. I can hire whoever I want. Now, you are allowed to pick and choose what employees you're going to hire, but there are ways to go about doing it. But she ended up hiring this lovely woman. She's now been with us almost 2 years. So Grace found what she was looking for. The woman found what she was looking for. Grace took the bull by the horns to do it. And luckily, we didn't get sued for age discrimination. So, a win-win for everybody. And then the last story I'm going to tell you about is about social situations and romantic relationships. So this is something that we're relationship positive in our house. We advocate for platonic relationships and boyfriend girlfriend relationships. They're all good. But if I thought social media, navigating that world was overwhelming, this last fiasco involved a triangle. It was Grace's friend, and Grace's friend's boyfriend. So Grace's friend's boyfriend, who was a bit of a player, I'm not going to lie, he was chatting Grace up through text messages and phone calls, expressing an interest in dating her while he is dating her friend. So, Grace really wanted a boyfriend. She was flattered by the attention, and, she kind of got caught up in it all. But after several conversations and a good cry, Grace realized that this is not done between friends. This is not what you do to your friend. And she decided she was going to call her friend and tell her. So not only did she end up calling her friend and telling her friend, but she told her friend while the friend was with said boyfriend. So 2.5 hours later, they all solved their problems. But mind you, I was standing outside the bedroom door, and from time to time, I would stick my head in and say, is it okay? And after about the third time, she looked at me, she put her finger out at me, and she said, I got this. You don't belong here. Get out. And you know what? Maybe that was a little rude, but she was right, because I didn't belong there. I didn't belong in that whole mess that was going on, that she and her friend were able to very rationally resolve. And after probably about 2 hours, the boyfriend admitted his guilt, promised to change his behavior. I think he did, but anyway, it all kind of worked without drama, without raising voices, without tears, and Grace retained those friendships. So, but as you can see, these are examples that show us how our youth will be able to make decisions on their own and be able to navigate these things if we become spectators and allow them to do so. So as we move on to the next slide, we're going to talk about these 9 issues that Louisa was referring to earlier. So no matter what your youth's disability is, how severe it is, everyone should have the opportunity to feel in control of something, right? So you can offer different options for what your youth could be able to choose and make decisions. And that's why we share these steps that are critical in your youth's development and into adulthood. And that's going to get here before you know it. So we're going to talk about encouraging self-determination. And we're going to discuss this thing called family decision making, self-advocacy. We're going to talk about that transition to planning and when to start that in school. We've already touched on that. The sooner the better, never too early or too late to start with that. Talking about delegating responsibilities and teaching basic life skills, exploring what level of independence can be achieved realistically, supporting your youth's social life, maybe without standing outside the door with your ear pinned to it when you know that there's a conflict. And then finally, assuming your role as passenger. So when I talk about self-determination, what do I mean? Self-determination is a concept that includes people choosing and setting their own goals and then working to make those goals become a reality. It involves making their own life decisions and self-advocating for their own choices, learning to effectively solve their own problems, and taking control and responsibility of their life. So when they make their decisions, having those decisions respected by you and others, and then taking responsibility for the consequences of those decisions, those actions. So self-determination usually contributes to positive results in education, employment, independent living, relationships, and an overall improved quality of life. And it encompasses all those self-words that you might hear thrown around, self-reliance, self-confidence, self-respect, self-esteem, self-motivation, self-advocacy. The skills included in self-determination are, how to be assertive, how to be creative, how to really take pride in yourself and your abilities, how to solve problems, how to set goals and make a plan to keep them, how to advocate for yourself, and how to take responsibility when you make a mistake. That's how we all learn, right? So because self-determination skills are most effectively learned and developed through practice, we need to give our youth ample opportunities to use these decision-making skills and socialization skills, certainly before they leave high school, but even from a very early age. Louisa and I and one of our colleagues did a presentation called From Cradle to Career. And it was really focused toward that 0 to 5 age group. And then we had an expert come and speak about how you get self-advocacy goals in during elementary school. So if you're already way past that, I'm not meaning to look back, but I'm just saying that it's never too late to have that self-advocacy goal in an IEP, because it's always good to work on that to help the youth become more confident in their own abilities. And, teaching these skills doesn't mean your youth will be making decisions all on their own, all of the time, but the gradual loosening of control as you hand the reins to them is so important. And an essential tool in helping anyone get to know themselves better is something called person-centered or person-driven planning. That's a process that helps people access the supports and services that they need to achieve a higher quality of life based on their own preferences, on their abilities, and on their values. And as Lisa talks more about person-centered planning, I'll put a couple of links into the chat that you can always, if you know how to get, you press on the 3 dots next to the chat, and you can copy the links, or all these links will be sent out with an email tomorrow along with the slide presentation. So Louisa.
Thank you, Alyssa. So as Alyssa was mentioning, person-centered thinking it's a way to make sure that the people that we're supporting, your child, your young adult, are getting the services they need, but while we're also respecting their personal preferences and values. It's about making sure that the person is at the center of any decisions that are made, and that we're focusing on their unique goals for a better quality of life. And one of the tools we use in this approach is called important to and important for. This helps us gather helpful information and make decisions together with the individual. So let's talk more about what this refers to. Important to refers to the things that really matter to the person. based on what they say or how they act. It's what makes them happy, what makes them feel satisfied. Um, Sometimes people don't always say what they mean directly, so we do have to pay attention to their actions or behaviors to really understand what's really important to them. For example, for your child, it might be very important to feel included in activities with friends or have control over decisions like what they're going to be eating, what they're going to be wearing, right? Now, important for are the things that help keep the person safe and healthy or help them be a valued part of the community. And these are things that we need to keep in mind to make sure that they're cared for. An example of this is it might be important for your child to take their medication regularly, or attend therapies to stay healthy. Now, knowing what is important to and what is important for can sometimes bring confusion because we need to make sure that there's a balance. And this can be difficult to achieve. And I'll put an example. Someone might really want to stay up late at night, right? They want to maybe watch movies or whatever it is. So that's important to them. But we know that it's important for their health to get enough sleep. So that's important for them. So finding the balance requires that we conversate, frequent conversations. It requires practice and it even requires compromise. So having regular conversations to check that these are being considered equally is important. This is going to help our child or young adult feel valued while also meeting their needs for safety and well-being. And on page 14 of a family care notebook that Parents Helping Parents has, you're going to find this worksheet to help you sort this out. And I'm going to show you how to access this in just a moment in the next slide. This can be a very practical tool to get started when finding that balance between what is important for your young adult and what is important for them, to them and for them. Sorry, I even get mixed up on this. Okay, so here is the family care notebook, and you'll find the digital versions for English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And there's actually a video explaining how to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly click on it just so that you can see what it looks like. So I'll click the English version. There you go. So you can download it, you can print it, and select the worksheets that you want to use, but it has different portions, getting to know the person in case of an emergency, other healthcare therapies that may be needed, the person's team, or support staff. And then we have definitions, acronyms, how to prepare for my meetings and organize my thoughts. And I thought this is a very nice portion to help them when preparing for their IEP meetings. So it has great resources that parents can refer to. What's the plan for the meeting? And then we go on to the person-centered thinking and planning, and it offers those tools like the one that we saw right now, the sorting important to and important for. So this is a great tool that you can start to initiate those conversations. All right, let's go back. Okay. So I'm sure Alyssa's going to drop the links too if needed. Now, another very important step in preparing your children is to consider making appropriate decisions. And there's a very fine line between being a protective parent and worrying and then becoming overprotective. However, overprotective parenting, even with the best intentions, can have a negative impact on your child's self-esteem and perception of their abilities. So it's useful to consider family decision-making on an ongoing basis. And here we're going to be presenting 4 different styles that you can take into account when helping your children make decisions. One of them is exclusion. So in this style, the objective is to protect the child, and this causes the child not to participate in the choice. Perhaps this is a decision-making style that we have adopted the most when our children are younger, or even when we think that our child does not have the necessary skills to choose. However, if we want to help our children learn how to make their decisions, we want to strive not to adopt this style too much, no matter how difficult it may be for us. Yeah. Another one is informational. So the goal here is to help the child understand and participate in decision making, but the parents make the final decision. Another one is a collaborative. So parents support and empower the child's decision making. And then we have delegative. So the choice is given completely to the child or young person, young adult. So families may adopt different decision-making styles depending on the decision at hand and the level of risk that is involved. For example, when choosing which school to attend, um, may more easily fall into the informational and collaborative or even, delegative categories. However, the decision to undergo life-changing surgery is more likely to fall into exclusionary or even informational categories. And here are some questions that you may be able to consider as you think about ways to support your child's growing independence. What are our family's ideas for becoming a successful adult? Or how does our family make decisions? Do our children have something to say? How could my child participate in decision making? How does our family support decision making for our children? So it is a wish for all of us as parents to see our children live to their full potential, right? So encouraging wise and appropriate decision making is one way to see our children grow and flourish as young adults. So we want to be able to really stop and think, ask ourselves these questions and try to see what decision making styles are appropriate in adopting, when making decisions. Now, encouraging self advocacy. And I know Alyssa talked a little bit since it kind of goes hand to hand with self determination, right? But self advocacy can be many things to many people. A self advocate can speak up for themselves, ask for what they need, share their thoughts and feelings with others, know their rights and responsibilities, maybe learn how to gather information on the things that interest them and learn how to ask for help, choosing who will support them in their life, make choices and decisions that affect their life. Now, how do we teach these self advocacy skills? First of all, starting early, right? We want to start as early as we can, teaching them that they have the skills to make decisions for themselves. And when we say early, you may think like, how can we teach that? I mean, it's as easy as, would you like an apple or would you like an orange? What color of t-shirt would you like to wear today? That's something that I put into practice with my 5 year, she's not 5 anymore, sorry, my 6 year old, almost 7, but I want to empower her to make decisions while also making sure that I choose appropriate outfits for her. So I give her 2 to 3 options, like, what do you want? But it's like, I already chose it for you, but you can choose. Right. So this empowers her and it allows her to feel like she has a voice. Another thing, self-awareness, help your youth to become aware of their strengths and their needs, be able to explain what the difference are. For example, strengths are areas where they can excel in, something that they find easy to do. And that's something that you can help them understand, something that you're very good at, maybe your areas like sports, creativity, art. And now, what is an example of needs? Areas where maybe you need support or accommodations, whether it's reading, focusing, so learning how to differentiate that. Also, promoting their voice and choice whenever possible and appropriate. And this, and here we can talk a little bit about student-led IEPs. Student-led IEPs, we have actual recordings. PHP has actual recordings of these webinars that are great, and they really provide youth with the tools needed. But this involves an active role in leading their meetings so that they can share their goals, their strengths, their challenges, so that they can set personal and academic goals that align with those interests and strengths. And there's a lot of benefits from a student-led IEP. They can obviously, aside from improving their self-advocacy skills, they can also be more accountable of their education and motivate them to meet their goals. And it also obviously promotes that collaboration with the team. Also exposing them to information on disability rights and responsibilities, encouraging them to ask for help when they need it. So self-advocacy is any time a person asks for what they need using polite, assertive communication. And I'll give you examples of this. It can be requesting extra help from the teacher, explaining what you need to do at a job, to a manager. Um, like Alyssa's story with Grace, being able to share symptoms and feelings with the doctor, finding something in a store, asking for directions, even agreeing or disagreeing about something with a partner or a friend, having these discussions and speaking up anywhere really about anything. So it's helpful when people with disabilities, no matter what their age or circumstance, that they know what they need in order to be successful and that they know how to ask for it. Now, how can you empower your children to advocate for themselves? Remember that everything is going to depend on the stage and the age that you are at. If we talk about young children, they learn through activities, they learn through interests, comics, games, recreation, being with their family, a lot of role playing, the community, and these change as they grow. When your child is at a more appropriate age and is able to engage in more conversations, you can maybe talk to them about their disability. Ask how the disability affects them, or at school, whether it's at home and their daily life, and listen carefully to those answers and discuss them. Also, discuss what supports or accommodations can help them at school, at home, in their daily life. You may be surprised at how accurate and helpful your child's perspective is on this matter. Helping your child discover their preferences and how to share that information with others, having good social skills is an important personal asset now and for the future, in their personal lives and in their professional lives. So also exploring the hopes and dreams that they have for their future, helping them translate those goals into step-by-step actions. And are there things that your son or daughter probably won't be able to do in reality given their disability? Explore those as well, but in a positive and in a supportive way. Now, if your child is in school, you can also encourage them to participate in IEP meetings. And we're going to see that. We're going to talk more about this in the next slide. So, adult transition planning in school is another very important step, in preparing your child for independence. When helping them plan for their IEP, their transition, you're going to encounter two big questions. The first one, when is it a good time to start? Well, although services must begin before the youth turns 16, planning often begins earlier. And there's like we mentioned before, there's some legislation that is already approved and it's set to start in July of 2025. And now this is gonna be starting in the 9th grade. So rather than it, stating that the 16th birthday, it's now gonna be the 9th grade. But even now, some IEP teams begin working with students as early as middle school to help them explore their interests and possible careers. There's different assessments, vocational assessments that can be done to explore or to see what their strengths are, what their needs are, what their interests are. So it often depends on the needs and maturity of the child. And if you want to know more about this, I mentioned one of the webinars that we presented on 2 weeks ago, Contribute Effectively to Your Youth's ITP. There's also another webinar on transition planning, and there's part 1 and part 2. And then there's also the student-led IEPs. So I know Alyssa will be sharing those links for you to check out the recordings. Now, the second question, what role should the student have in IEP transition meetings? Well, in general, students are required to be invited to their transition IEP meetings. Many attend and take leadership roles. After all, they're the ones that are going to be preparing for adult life. But at the same time, not all children have the skills or maturity to play a leadership role in IEP meetings. By law, those students can be part of the IEP team whenever it's appropriate. And here are some questions that can help you decide if your child is ready. One of them, does your child know what an IEP is? If you decide to invite your child to the meeting, it's important to have an honest discussion, beforehand about what an IEP is and how you and the school develop it. The meeting should not be the first time your child learns that they need an IEP or additional help. Now, does your child want to attend the IEP meeting? One way that the IEP process can be empowering is to give your child the option to attend. So if your child is reluctant, it may be best to wait until the thought of attending the meeting doesn't make them anxious or makes them nervous. They may participate maybe in one part of the meeting, and maybe planning and discussing annual goals for accommodations also has other benefits for children. It gives them practice articulating their strengths and weaknesses. Many parents find it helpful to sit with them before a meeting and write down what they think can work, and then share those thoughts with the IEP team if they probably still feel a lot of anxious and thoughts, or are nervous to attend. Now, another question: does your child seem ready to advocate for themselves? It's okay for your child to sit at the table and just listen, but the meeting is also a great opportunity for your child to start practicing self advocacy. As your children grow, it becomes increasingly important for them to be able to speak for themselves and tell others what they need in order to succeed, in order to thrive. So IEP meetings are a wonderful time to begin, owning these skills, to begin practicing. But now let's give it to Alyssa to continue with these tips.
Well, yeah, thanks, Louisa. You know, what we always say is what better place, what better safe environment to practice self-advocacy skills than an IEP meeting. Evidence shows that students who actively participate throughout the IEP planning process are more likely to be engaged in school and more likely to be successful when attempting to achieve their goals. Uh, that's what we want for all our kids, right? To be able to think, to learn, and to advocate for themselves. I was one of those parents who didn't want my daughter to come to IEP meetings. And now I wish I had. I wish I had her come when she was, 3, 4, 5, and say, I'm good at math, or my favorite color is pink, or I really like to sing and I like choir. Um, she started coming to about half of her IEP meeting when she was 16, when, by the IDEA, as Louisa was mentioning, youth need to be invited to their transition IEP meetings. So she came and she'd write out her own version of her transition goals, those 3 overarching transition goals, which, by the way, I know I divert here, but all those uh, videos that Louisa was referring to, I have put links in the chat. The ITP part 1 and part 2 are actually coming up, so you can check the calendar for those. You can also check the links in the chat, and also the student-led IEPs. We have one for parents and one for youth. So, really encourage sending your youth to it. It's really well done. It's short, it's interactive, and the feedback we've gotten from the youth themselves has been really good. So anyway, all right. So back to Grace coming to her IEP for half the time, writing out her version of her transition goals. And also she had been having some interpersonal issues. This was in high school. And, I had been asking to try and set up counseling for about 4 months. And Grace came, she stated what issues she was having. She asked if she could have counseling. Within 2 weeks, she was set up with weekly counseling. So never underestimate the power of the voice of the person who the IEP is meant for. You'll find your learner is actually really enjoys coming to the IEP. And I found this out when Grace actually was about 19, so she'd been coming to her IEPs now for about 3 years. And an email went out to arrange the IEP, not the invitation, but to just schedule it. What was good for everybody's schedule. And so I, answered, and I then said to Grace, "Oh, your IEP is on such date, 3 weeks from now." Excuse me. And her response was, and I have to read it to you. And apologies if you've heard this story before, because I know I tell it a lot, but it's a good one. So she put down her pen and she looked at me and she said, "It's my IEP. Didn't anybody think to consult me about my schedule? It's not right. It's disrespectful. Why do they tell me I'm a grown-up and that my opinion matters and I should make my own decisions, and no one even thinks to consult me about scheduling my IEP? I feel betrayed. What were they thinking?" She went on to say she didn't want to miss her work program on that day. She didn't want to let her boss down. I didn't have a good response, but you could bet that she was on, every scheduling email from then on in. And just as an ending to that story, she left her transition program in June of 2020, so everything was shut down. But she was at this work program through her transition program, and in the summer of 2021, she was hired by that surf shop. And she worked there for 2.5 years. So obviously her work ethic was valued enough that that employer wanted to hire her. So as parents, we just need to understand that folks with disabilities, that's that disability cry, nothing about us without us. They really believe in that. And we have to start, as we start taking that step back from being the manager to being consultant, they are going to start stepping up and doing things on their own. And it's wonderful to see when they do start blossoming like that. So how do we delegate those responsibilities, which is one of those 9 things, from an early age, a young age, and even whatever age they are now? You want to start with simpler responsibilities. You don't want to heap too much on at once. And once they have one simple responsibility, they overcome it, small goal, you move on to more complex things. Generally we all have resistance to learning new skills, right? Because maybe we're overwhelmed with the instructions, or maybe we expect or want perfection after the first try. But that the old adage, try, try, try again, right? That doesn't come from nowhere. It comes because you have to try, you have to make a mistake, you learn from your mistake, and then you succeed. So you want to provide them with opportunities for easy successes, but then also for not so easy successes, so that they'll learn. And you need to have patience with this. And I know that's hard, but they're not going to do everything the way you think they should do them every time. My daughter still does not pull those bed sheet corners tight enough. I think, isn't that fitted sheet riding up on you in the middle of the night? And you know what? It's not. So that's something that I've had to let go of. She makes her bed the way she wants to make her bed, and it's really good that she makes her bed. That's the bottom line. So you want to award that sense of accomplishment, however rewarding you might do, whether it's verbal, whether it's with any kind of prize, a sticker sheet, whatever it might be. That motivates them and makes them feel important and raises their self-esteem at this crucial phase. We want to be constant and encourage them with phrases like, look how well you did that, or even better, you worked so hard to do that, so that they'll understand good results often, if not always, come and involve hard work. So with encouragement, when they venture out into the world, they'll be no stranger to responsibility and the work involved in being responsible for something, because learning never stops. But we did talk about teaching those basic life skills. So basic life skills are just as important to a young adult's success as certain academic skills. I mean, for sure. How to manage money. So maybe you might want to give them a certain amount of a weekly budget or a monthly budget, and just invite them to go shopping for their own personal items, shampoo, body soap, deodorant, those kind of essentials, and let them pay for it out of their weekly budget. I talked about how Grace has her budget for Cookie's food. So, she doesn't have the money, then Cookie can't eat, and she realizes the importance of that. Coping skills. Now, this is a huge one and deserves its own, hour, but that series of thoughts and actions that enable people to handle difficult situations. Who here has not had a difficult situation at some time in your life? So knowing how to cope with the difficult situation, knowing what to do with that stress, whether it's going to be practicing deep breathing or going for a walk, or, taking a minute for a mindfulness break or a mindfulness exercise, listening to music, writing in a diary. Sensory stimulation is a big thing for a lot of our kiddos. Calling a friend, playing with a pet, and then also really promoting, maintaining that positive internal dialogue, which, you could say something like, I know I was wrong, but I'll know how to react next time better. We talked a little bit about technology and all the technology that we have available to us these days to help them to organize themselves and maybe help with those deficits in executive functioning skills. And what about transportation? I mean, just knowing how to read a bus schedule, knowing how to, get the token or get the card, that you can get filled and refilled and be able to get from point A to point B, even if they're with somebody, even if they have an aide accompanying them 24/7, being able to be the lead on that, that's huge. We want to make sure that they can understand information and communicate with others. And maybe some kids might even be getting their driver's licenses, which is a whole nother, scary thing that we don't want to go into. But the important thing is to encourage your youth to set their own expectations for themselves on what they can do and move away from reiterating your expectations for them. We want to encourage and normalize challenges and mistakes. Help by discussing with your youth how they would handle the challenge or mistake, maybe doing some role playing like Louisa was mentioning. So when your youth is more confident with these basic life skills, they'll be more confident with the more complex skills that are coming down the road and more comfortable with independence. This next sheet is from thinkcollege.net. If you haven't visited this site, I recommend you do. This is from Dr. Carla Wade, I think her name is, and it's 20 powerful strategies for preparing for post-secondary life. And it has things on here like, I mean, I don't have to read all of them, but, taking public transportation when even you don't have to, and help them become more comfortable with downtime, and supporting your child's volunteering for a cause or an organization, or helping them get an internship, encouraging sleepaway camp. Things that aren't on here are things like the basics, like we talked about, doing laundry, learning how to iron. Does anybody iron anymore? So I don't know about learning about ironing. That might be like filling out a checkbook, but basic sewing, sewing a button on something, preparing simple meals, just even cleaning their room, learning how to make a bed, like I talked about. And what about using the phone and leaving a voicemail? Youth these days, it's always about the thumbs, right? It's not about phones, but phones, they're not that antiquated. So how do you use a phone? How do you answer a phone? How do you leave a voicemail? And what about writing an email with correct punctuation, with correct capitalization? These are the important things that you can help scaffold for them, that will help them when they leave the nest, as it were. So the idea here being is to shift to your young adult the lead problem solver, that they are the ones who are going to be doing this. They are the ones who are going to be making the decision. Now, you might want to discuss scenarios for when they become the ultimate decision maker, and they may still be consulting with you, which is fine, because now you're going from manager to consultant, so you might as well consult. But we want to make sure that we're teaching them how to flex those decision-making muscles. So again, we want to encourage them to make their expectations for themselves and move away from reiterating yours. On that list of 9 was also what level of independence can be achieved and being realistic about it. So Louisa likes to say it's important to know your destination. When you have a youth and you have a support system in place, a circle of support, and you have a solid transition plan for a lifestyle that your youth wants to lead when they enter adulthood, then you have something to work with. The independent living, I mean, you might be looking at, they might be living at home with you, they might be living somewhere else. Have they connected with agencies like the Department of Rehab, independent living centers? Are they regional center clients? Have you explored together options and talked about, what they want for their lives? If your youth's not ready to move out, or if they're never going to move out, then you want to make sure you give them manageable responsibilities in your home. Just think about what you'd expect from any other adult living in your home, and then just, make that work for your adult if they are living with you. Is that helping to clean the house, washing the dishes, taking out the trash, cleaning the bathrooms? That's a huge one, right? Cutting the grass. So we want to just be able to shift our mindset, not only to a person-centered thinking mindset, which, by the way, I mean, Louisa does a good job in covering it here, but this is a big, big topic. And the Family Care Notebook is the tip of the iceberg from where to start. And I put in the chat the Learning Center, and then Trudy Grable, who I have taken coursework from. I consider her a mentor, a teacher, and she will say, You need to shift your mindset and know that you're letting go to let grow. And I love when Trudy says that, because it really feels very authentic. You want them to grow. That's what you want, because we're not going to be here forever. But that's another issue. And we actually have a 3-part series coming up that Trudy is actually going to be facilitating, called I Won't Be Here Forever. So that's in October, starting next week. I don't believe it's October next week. There are 3 sessions on 3 consecutive Wednesdays. So no matter what the realistic capabilities of your youth, socialization, maintaining friendships, not experiencing that isolation that we hear so much about and that we see happening often, it's essential. So Luis is going to talk more about supporting that socialization.
Yes, thank you, Alyssa. So supporting your child's social life is just as important as helping them in school or teaching them life skills. Building healthy relationships is something that they're going to carry with them into adulthood. And it's a skill that needs to be developed early on. Some children, young people, adults may struggle with starting conversations, reading social cues, knowing how to maintain friendships. And these social skills may not come naturally to everyone, but they can definitely be learned and they can be practiced. We want to think of social skills as tools that can get better over time. And role playing or modeling behavior can be a great way to teach those skills. You might act out different scenarios, like how to greet someone or how to keep a conversation going, how to help your child feel more confident. Encouraging them to develop these skills early on has many benefits, major benefits. One of them, for example, it can reduce stress in social situations. It can boost their self-esteem, help them become more involved in the community as they grow. They're also going to be feeling more confident and comfortable in social settings for both personally and professionally. Now, forcing them into participating in social situations is not is not something that we want to do, because it won't automatically make them better at interacting with others. So we want to be careful with that. How can we help as parents? Maybe encouraging their interest, which can naturally lead them into making friends. For example, if they love sports, if they like art, maybe helping them join a club where they can meet people who share those interests. This way, they're going to be more likely to feel comfortable, be themselves, which is the foundation of having a good friendship, right? Some tips that we can encourage as parents is helping them keep in touch with existing friends by helping them maybe plan hangouts, join group activities, community events, expanding that circle by finding opportunities to meet new people through different extracurricular activities. We want to teach them small steps for social interaction, like how to start a conversation. And this can even start at home, like saying hello to the neighbor. Or when we do our day-to-day activities and go to the store, how to have small talk with the cashier, listening actively, having conversations where you talk and maybe ask them to repeat back what they heard and ensure that they understand your feelings. Showing empathy to others. And this is something that can be very helpful when they volunteer, when they help others, discussing how that made them feel. So supporting your youth social life is very important. Now, finally, learning to take on your new role will help you prepare for your child's independence. When our children are young, we tend to be the main decision makers, as we have learned, right? We lead their lives. But even from in early age, we can help them take control by delegating those responsibilities, as Alyssa covered. Our children become young adults. Let us take care, to change our role from driver to passenger. Let's help to reframe the language that our youth uses, from what should I do to here's what I think, or what do you think? Doing this is going to help us ensure that our child feels empowered to make their own decisions with confidence, while also keeping us informed. So it kind of allows us to be their sounding boards, offering advice whenever they need it. We know that it's not an easy task to change roles and let go, even when our child has a more severe disability and will always require support from us or a caregiver. But you as a parent will determine the level of independence that can be given depending on their abilities. But Fostering as much independence as possible is very important for their long-term successes and self-confidence. And finally, remember that letting go does not mean that you're going to abandon your child to the big world, expect them to succeed. Rather, it means that you're going to encourage your young adult to be as independent as they can be. And something that can help us live this process more calmly is these tips that you see here. Staying in communication with your family and friends, connecting with other families that are going through the same thing. Reach out to your local parent center, whether it's PHP, whether it's Task, whether you're in Central California, wherever you are. There's a parent center that can support you. There's support groups that you can be part of. Connect with the resources in your community so that you will stay up to date and be able to attend to better guide your children. Also, think about skills your youth needs to work on. Take them one at a time. We don't want to do it all at once and overwhelm ourselves, right? Also consider where your youth can step up and where you as a parent can step back. Remember that growing up is just a step in becoming a grown up. So we need patience, right? Give them loads of opportunities to try and fail and try again. So learning from their mistakes. And, get involved in Connections California events. Get involved in, they have so many different videos, e-learning categories where you can really, gain knowledge and have strategies, tips, tools that will help you navigate the transition process in a smoother way. Remember that they have 5 transition categories. So depending on what stage your child is in, transition planning, education and training, adult living, job readiness, individual advocacy, try to choose one and focus on that one and create a step-by-step, action plan for you and your youth. Sign up to the webinars. And also, you don't want to forget to look at their transition timeline, which is a beauty, a digital beauty that you can access, and it works as an amazing guide, to help you navigate the transition process. If you need direct services from one of the resource specialists, you can call Parents Helping Parents, Task, or wherever the local parent center is, so that you can receive that one-on-one support. So you can find that information as well. And there's an online library. So Alyssa shared so many links tonight that take you to, recorded webinars that happen throughout the weeks that you can go and check out at your own time. And again, we want to thank you so much for being here with us in this training. We hope that you found this presentation useful and informative. Most of webinar support group services that parent centers offer, such as PHP and Task, are free to our families. So, we're committed to providing high quality content, for online for families like yours. So we really, really appreciate your consideration and joining us and being involved.